Active on the mute button while you're talking.
Good morning, good afternoon, Galinichta, Galimera, wherever in the world you might be. Thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. My message to you today, Gooners, don't panic. Let's go.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live edition of the Highbury Squad, another post-game show, another opportunity to see our beloved Arsenal play. Was that a game of football? Not sure. Felt like a bit of a street fight, like an old school playground game I used to partake in sometimes in North London. Joining me on the show today is one of my favourites, Mr. Jared Carver from the Gooners Pod. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you so much. Great to be back and see you again. Like you, I'm a little under the weather, so we're both going to be battling our way through. The nice thing for me is I have the premier hot beverage vessel to cure all of my ails as we try and make it through the show today, so I should be good to go.
Damn, I should have my Vinny mug here. I'm terrible marketer, really. I look pale. Jared and I are not feeling good at all, but here we are, sweating like swine and ready to talk about our club. Don't forget to go visit our friends at ZENITH Coins, of course. If you missed out on buying something over the holidays, our 20% discount still is active. So go have a look and check them out. Right. Welcome, squaddies. I always lose my manners when Super Kev isn't here. At ease, everyone, at ease. The usual suspects are in the house, and we appreciate you joining us. Whoa, Jared, what an ugly football game that was.
It really was. After about the first 15 minutes, I think they came out with the idea they were going to press us and see if they could get anything out of it. After about 15 minutes of us just carving through them back to front with a relative ease, I think they went to kind of plan B, and that was pretty much to slow the game down, play physical, try and take us off of what we want to do, and play a game that's much more suitable to their style, where it's a lot of downtime, a lot of set pieces, and just overall physicality. And I know you and I are the same on this. I hate watching games like that. It's not enjoyable. There's no flow. But if you were going to say which team came out and executed the plan they wanted to get the result they wanted, I'd have to say it was Newcastle, unfortunately for us.
100%. Do you agree with Lynn here? Do you think the ref lost control of the game in the first half, which kind of then was the trigger for, so many plays on yellow cards, also changes the game in terms of how they play on a wet night as well? Do you agree with Lynn here? To me, felt like he should be a pub team ref.
It certainly felt that way watching it. I try in general to not be too harsh on the refs immediately after games until I've gone back and watched it, because I think all of us that are fans, we sort of view the game through Arsenal tinted glasses. So we always kind of feel like we're getting slighted, but it sure felt that way. It became disjointed really quickly when the yellow cards started to pile up. I was concerned. I think it was just before the 60-minute mark when Saka got fouled and was about to take the free kick on the right side, and he gave Almiron a card for just standing, toes over the line. I was worried that was a little much. Maybe he was going to continue to interject himself when it wasn't necessarily needed, but there was so much time wasting involved. Whether the yellow cards continued or not, the game was just going to continue to be a little bit disjointed and stop and go, unfortunately.
Yeah, I felt like I just tweeted at the end there. Did Eddie Howe spend Christmas with Diego Simeone just a little bit? Because they were masters of the dark arts today, Newcastle. I will give them that. I hate watching games like that. Jared and I were just talking before we came on air. Frustrating. They came to scrap and get a point, and they executed flawlessly. They frustrated us. We didn't capitalize on the blistering start that we had in the first 15 minutes. Wonderful opportunity for Odegaard. And then, of course, that header from Gabriel was just inches away. And to be fair to them, their kind of frustrating game plan, Jared, I think spilled over into just ugliness at the end. The time wasting was ridiculous. Even when Thomas was trying to take the throw in at the end, I can't remember which Newcastle player was just standing in front of him. It was just a little bit ridiculous. And that's where Mikel got very frustrated. And I'm shocked that Mikel didn't get carded himself because he was losing his marbles.
Yeah, and I think he had every right to. There's a little bit of time wasting that you're going to see in every game, and then it's just pushing it to the absolute extreme, which I think is what we saw here. And it was, I believe, Lascelles on the touchline there getting in the way of the throw in, which isn't surprising at all because he embodies everything that they did today. That's his type of game, super physical, time wasting, all the dark arts. So it's just a frustrating end because, like you said, they came to the Emirates to try and sneak out of there with a point, and they got the job done. And that to me is the disappointing part, is they came to not play and they succeeded, unfortunately for us. And we had a couple close chances, but if you don't take advantage of those, they're a tough team to score on when their plan is to kind of set in with all those big bodies and just hold you out and not really do much on the counter, which, you know, they did successfully, to their credit, I suppose.
How much were you freaking out at the end there, Jared, when they got the corner?
It was not my favorite moment of the game, because even in the first half, when I think we all thought the latter part of it felt kind of nervy, they really didn't produce any quality chances at all until the final minute, the set piece where they headed the ball on, and we were pretty well exposed at the back corner. Luckily, they didn't have anybody there to convert it. But after that's the way the first half ended, when I saw that ball go out for a corner, I was definitely concerned that, you know, they've played us right where they want us, down to the point where the game's basically over and they've got a shot at a corner where they're pretty dangerous.
So this is coming in a lot. Let's get your take on this. Was Odegaard off, or did Newcastle play him out the game? I think they played him out the game. He got frustrated, and it's so weird. This is so ironic because Kev and I were lauding him on Monday for being a player that in the Premier League, unusually, Jared, has so much. He makes it feel like he has so much time on the ball, and he slows a game down in the Premier League. And he's been really genius at that, especially in the last few matches. I think you have to be really careful about starting to kind of really have a pop at the players tonight, because Newcastle were playing man on man. They were playing like an 8-1-1. I mean, they shifted gears all the time, and credit to them. They just frustrated our creativity. Saka was absolutely beaten to a pulp this evening. And then when we did get our chances, we didn't capitalize on them. But I think that Newcastle just really did a good job on the captain. What are your thoughts on that one?
I completely agree. I said on our pod last night, I thought outside of maybe Haaland, he's been the best player in the Premier League so far this season. And I don't think he was on an off night, because if you watch that first 15 minutes where they were trying to press us and we were playing our style, he was very effective. He got the ball in space in the middle of the pitch. He was able to turn, get some outlet balls, and he was very effective. And to their credit, they adjusted, slowed the game down. And I think, like you said, sort of played him out of it more than him going out and having a bad outing.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so before we get to the play ratings, excuse me, sniffle, let me read the stats to you guys. We had 17 shots, they had 8. We had 4 on target, they had 1. 67% possession for us, 33 for them. Notice the difference in the Brighton game. We had 33%, or in the 30s, possession-wise. Just shows you kind of what Kev was talking about. And what we've seen in previous games, you know, you just have to take your chances when they come. 536 passes, 253 for them. Our accuracy was at 86%, 71 for them. 10 fouls. They committed 16 fouls, got 5 yellow cards. We got 4. 2 of them absolutely bogus, by the way. 4 offsides for them, 1 for us, and 5 corners each. One of the most frustrating things, I think, is, you know, when you're playing a team like that, you can't let it affect you. What I said on the show a few days ago, Jared, was mentally is where this team will rise and fall this season. We saw last season how we kind of fell off the cliff towards the end mentally. And, you know, this is the thing that I've been super impressed with, and the job that Mikel has done in terms of transitioning that disappointment and channeling it into, you know, the way we've been playing, the type of football and the mental attitude the team has shown. And there were times where I was a little bit worried, like when Xhaka got a yellow card, I was like, are we reverting back to type? But I don't really want to like point the finger too much at the players, because in the end, I do think, even though they got sucked into the scrap, mentally they stayed engaged in the game and we really pushed towards the end there to try and win it. Do you think that we did a good job mentally in that match tonight?
Yeah, I think towards the very end of the first half, we were a little bit off and it was affecting us some, but half came, we didn't concede a goal. And I think the team really leveled out. I'm sure the team talk was a lot about just maintaining composure, understanding that it's going to be physical and you may not get every call you're used to getting and you need to adjust and play through it. In the second half, I thought we did that pretty well. I mean, even down the last 10 minutes, they were packed down into their final third with us attacking over and over and over. Now, to their credit, they held us out, but I didn't feel like we gave the game away or got away from our game plan or they stopped our attack. They were just able to keep us out when they needed to, unfortunately.
Yeah. What do you think about the penalty shouts?
The last one's tough. I understand the proximity piece of it, but you're also talking about Xhaka's proximity to goal is very small there. So, I mean, by that standard, any ball that someone knocks down with their hand, they're going to call proximity. He's very close to the goal. The player's close to him, but he's on the line playing it into the most dangerous area you can play it. Those are always tough as a fan to see not given, because if, he doesn't hit that ball with his hand, it is in right in front of Pope in a very dangerous area when we need a goal. So it's one of those where however it was called on the pitch, I think was going to stand. Had he called it a penalty, they're certainly not going to go in and overturn that with VAR. But being that he waved it off immediately, I think we were sort of doomed to our fate at that point, and that was going to be the end of it. I
mean, the Gabriel one to me seemed like we've seen those given this season, last season. It just felt like, I mean, Gabriel doesn't topple over easily. He's quite a beast. And then the handball as well. A lot of the times we argue about, well, was that a handball or not? Was that a shirt pull or not? The offside and the handball in particular aren't necessarily always down to, the referee making a bad decision. It's the rules of the game, unfortunately, that scupper those decisions from going our way. I actually thought both were legitimate penalty shouts. I'm not one to blame referees for losses or draws or wins, because even when we win, decisions go our way. These things happen, the rub of the green. But tonight, I just felt like the handball, it wasn't like it was coming at his face. It hit his arm. Old school, that's a handball to me, and that's a penalty. And the challenge on Gabriel as well, I thought was a legitimate shout for a penalty. And just again, the quality of the referee on this occasion, I think it wasn't about the rules of the game, Jared. I think it was just the quality of the referee. He just completely killed the game. He made bad decisions and unfortunately lost control. And I think the Premier League, they need to wake up to these moments, because some of these games, and this was a big game, it was a top 4 match, you just need a bit more experience. And it's just shoddy when you look at some of the referees and the qualities and the continual discussion that just ensues post matches. It's just got to stop. He was absolutely a horror referee tonight. And I'm not blaming him for the fact that we drew, because I think Newcastle deserved a point, but he didn't help.
I completely agree. And it's sad that every year and every other game week, we're having the same conversation. And it's not even about an individual call being incorrect. What the frustrating part for me is that we're going to watch a game this weekend where there's a similar handball situation or a similar pullback in the box, and it is given. And that's almost always my critique. Isn't necessarily an individual call. It's the lack of consistency week to week. And it makes it frustrating as a fan, obviously, but also if you're a player, how do you go out and defend now? Are you grabbing shirts in the box, or are you letting them go? When it's not called consistently, you just keep getting yourself in these awkward situations where you see some teams that seem to get the benefit and some don't. Of course, every fan thinks their team's getting the short end, but when you referee these same situations and adjudicate them differently, you're just opening the door for that to happen and to be a continual problem like we've seen the past handful of years or more.
Yeah, brilliantly summarized. Okay, let's get to the play ratings, shall we? We're going to talk about the subs when we get to Mikel, you guys, at the very end of the ratings. I know a lot of you were DMing me, and many of you at the top of the show in the chat box were asking why, and we'll get Jared's take on that as well. And yes, Ian, it is a Highbury Squad mug. Why don't you just show that thing off one more time for the Oh, it's nice, isn't it? It's high quality. Look at that. Very nice.
Absolute
Very nice
beauty.
indeed.
I love it.
All right, Jared. Who is up first?
All right. So, of course, we'll start it off in goal with Ramsdale. I'm curious to see where we're both going to have this, because very often in a game where you keep a clean sheet, the goalkeeper is getting a relatively high rating. I'll let you fire first. I made myself some notes here, but I'm kind of curious to see where you're going to fall on him today.
Well, he didn't. There was one moment where I absolutely was afraid, where luckily it was called offside. He came out of his box. It was towards the end. Was it Wilson that was, I can't remember who the Newcastle player was, but I hate this rule too, where they wait to put up the flag after the play has ensued. But I didn't think he had too much to do today. But when he did, I felt like he was much more in control and much more comfortable than he was against Brighton. Against Brighton, I was really concerned. And you could see the different quality. And Brighton went on beat, have thrashed Everton 4-1 this evening. Paul Kev covering that game as well for Sky Sports. That's a brutal one. When he was asked to come in, I thought he did a really good job. There was one moment where he cleared the ball and it landed to a Newcastle play towards the end. And I was wondering if there was going to be one of those, how far out is the Newcastle play going to try and lob it over him? But I'll give him a 7. I'm with Byron on this one.
Yeah. Looking at him, like you said, he didn't have a lot to do. While it felt nervy at times, they weren't super threatening or getting many shots on goal. He did have one moment where he was a little bit casual, playing the ball out, and somebody ran onto him, and it got a little squirrely for about 10 seconds. But other than that, I thought he played a pretty average game for him. I would say it would be a 5 game for me, other than he did keep the clean sheet. So I'd give him a bonus point there, and I had him down for a 6.
All right, fair enough. 6. Who's next?
Yeah, going on from there is, I didn't have a huge rating on any of our defense, which is a little bit odd in a clean sheet game. The one exception I had was Ben White. I thought he was absolutely brilliant, especially in the first half of the game. He just looked like he was everywhere in attack and defense. He was physical. He was aggressive. He was everything we want him to be and everything we're used to him being. So I had him rated considerably higher than the rest of the defense. Even though he did come off early, I still had him down for an 8.
I'm completely in agreement with you. For me right now, thank you so much. For me right now, no more. Cheers. It's my big mug. Excuse me. Have to have a sip. So for me right now, he's one of our best players. Why is he getting subbed? Why is he the one getting subbed with 20 minutes to go? Can you help me understand this? Somebody. Jared?
It was an odd choice. I think a little bit with the run of games we have coming in. I think there was just a thought ahead of time. We saw him come off early in the last game that maybe since we have Tottenham coming up, we have United coming up, and these are all big matchups. I think there may have been a thought ahead of time that we're going to try and play him 70 to 75 a game over that run just to keep his legs fresh, because we ask a lot of him, and he's been there to deliver it, but we do demand a lot of him, more so than some other players. So I think it's just a matter of, I don't know if you want to call it load management, but that's my best guess, because like you, I think he's been in many days our best defender. So it seems odd that he would be the first one you take off. But that's the only situation I can think of, because when he's out there, I don't see any reason we would want to remove him before the 90.
Yeah, I'm not saying Demsek that I disagree with the substitution. I'm curious as to know what the timing of it, because it's very similar, and I'm happy for him to be managed the way he is, because he's such a fundamentally important player to us, and we want him to be. These are tough physical games, aren't they? Tottenham's going to be tough and physical. Manchester United's going to be tough and physical. Hopefully he'll get a break in the FA Cup round as well. And, Elliot from Arsenal Vision on our show yesterday talked about fatigue and how some of our players look gassed towards the end of the Brighton game. And Kev is not having any of that. He's not a fatigue guy, doesn't, believe that that's the case. And especially when most players haven't really played. I mean, they've been off for a month. Saka and Xhaka have probably played the most football. So I'm from an educational point of view, I'd like to understand a little bit more why that is. All right, next up.
All right, next up, we'll go to the center. We've got William Saliba.
Right. Big Willie. He's not been ticking the last few matches, but I'm not I don't know if he put too much of a foot wrong this evening. Again, Newcastle's game plan was totally different, so we didn't really have to see the best of the defense. They just had to kind of do their job, as Bill Belichick would say, when the time came. But I thought it was a much better game for him. I thought that he looked a lot more comfortable against a team that is a lot more physical than Brighton. And, you know, for me, he gets a solid 7. Jared, what's your take on Big Willie?
Yeah,
I don't know why I'm
calling him
that. I'm thinking about Will Smith. I'll stop that now.
Yeah, he's not popular anymore.
No.
I thought kind of the same. He didn't have any specific instances where I thought he played poorly. In fact, after some set pieces when they were trying to reset, he even came out to almost a left back position and was playing effectively out in that area too. So we set such a high standard for him because he is so talented at such a young age. When he has games like this, I think a lot of times people say, you know, he was a little bit off, but realistically, he played a solid game. I had him down for a 7 as well. And I just didn't really have a bad thing to say about him. He was just kind of like he does, plodded along very calmly and did his thing and was effective in the position. So like you, I had him down for a 7 and thought that was a pretty fair score for him.
So also, I want to remind everybody too that even though he didn't play in that first 11 in the World Cup a lot, you know, being as part of a squad that loses a major final like that, it's your country, it's your team, it's your brotherhood, it's your boys, you know, that's kind of a lot, sucks the life out of you a little bit, that experience. And I think that we'll start seeing, you know, the best of him again. And, you know, Jared, some players, when they're off and they're not playing, even though they're still training, takes them a while. You know, there are some players that can just kind of slot back in. Martinelli and Saka don't seem to be fazed by much. They just come back in and grind and keep rolling and working. So I just want to remind people that, you know, that is still probably something that he's kind of getting to grips with as well. And agree with you, Marcello. Saliba is safe and sound. Right. Next up.
All right, we'll go to his center half partner, Gabriel.
I'm loving this guy. I mean, I think he's my new player crush. I just love everything about him. He should have scored today. It was a great header. He missed it by a hair's breadth. Mm-hmm. He's been so solid for us in a time when, you know, Saliba hasn't been that great. And likewise at the beginning of the season when some Arsenal fans were questioning him, Jared, you know, Saliba was saving him. So I kind of like the fact that we've developed this team where if one guy's not playing particularly well, the other can pick them up. I've said on the show before, the only one collective stinker that we had was PSV away in the Europa League. I just think that he's become commanding. I believe that he has not going to the World Cup has done this player the world of good. He's playing with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. That's just my humble opinion. But he's come in, no complaints, no nothing. He just gets on with the job. And I just adore him. I think he's so solid. And the fact that he didn't get picked, and it's more upsetting, I think, for Brazilian players to get slighted by their national team than a lot of nations. And that's just because of that Brazilian passion and, of course, their historical success in football. But for me, I think he gets an 8.5 today.
Yeah, I'm with you. I had him down on my notes here as an 8. I thought he was great. And it's an interesting dynamic, as you said. It seems like they pick each other up when one has an off game. And early in the year, all the talk was about Saliba in the center of our defense and how good he is. And rightfully so, he's talented. But Gabriel's quietly just continued to plod along, play his game, and be effective. And especially in games when you're playing a team like Newcastle, who has some absolutely massive guys on these set pieces where they excel. He's even more important, and he's obviously the best aerial player we have. He and probably Tomiyasu, to his credit. But they didn't get much off of those, and I think he's a big part of that. He's so dominating, as you said, in the air, and he just controls his area well. And I also love kind of the dynamic of, you know, if Saliba is very ice as a player, he's definitely fire. He's got that passion, probably a part of being, you know, that's Brazilian football. But I think just all of those things together make them such a solid pairing that really work well together. And, you know, there's a reason that, you know, this is one of the worst results we've had this season, and we came away with a clean sheet. So when you can say that, your defense is typically doing a pretty good job.
And some of the squaddies have also talked about how, and 250 plus of you, thanks for joining us live post game. Hit that like button for us. Give it a bit of a cuddle because we did get a point, and it may be disappointing, but this is the best defense in the league. Newcastle have only lost one game this season. This is not a disaster by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, he's just he's to me, he's playing like captain material too, and he's stepping up. So, all right, I lost my train of thought there. Probably a good thing. Let's move on.
All good. So we'll round out the defense, left back position, the guy who's his second game back, I think, from injury, in Zinchenko. What did you think of his game today?
There were times where I was talking to my cousin on WhatsApp and I was like, is he having a good game or a bad game? And I couldn't figure it out because I just felt like there were times where he was a bit cheap with the ball. But in the second half again, I was saying to my cousin George, I said, maybe, Zinny should be subbed for Tierney because this is a much more physical game. And if there's a player that I want to make sure is available for that North London derby, it is this guy, right? I thought he was good. I just don't think he was great. What worries me sometimes is that he gets too excited about that forward movement and, you've got gaps at the back. But then again, he wasn't really troubled at the back today. So for me, I love his passion at the end there where he's getting angry, where he's trying to get the throw in and, the referee stopped the game again. And you see all of that his will to win and the other side of the game that he just brings to the table for this team. So for me, I just think he gets a 6.5 today.
Yeah, I loved the bit at the end too. He's got the character of this type of Arsenal team. He's a hard worker. He's passionate. He's got good leadership qualities. So there's a million things I like about him. When I was doing my ratings after the game, it was almost like I don't remember a lot of anything that he did. He wasn't outstanding going forward, but I don't have any thought of anything he really did wrong defensively. So he was just kind of probably played, in my estimation, a pretty average game. I had him down for a 6. I think we're kind of in the same mind on him. Didn't play poorly, but certainly wasn't a standout game by his standards by any means.
You know what it is? It's like, because a couple of people saying everything went through him today, and that might be the case. But unfortunately for us, whatever went through any player today, our ball in the final third, that part of our game was off. It wasn't great. Martinelli was holding onto the ball too long. Saka was maybe trying a little bit too hard. Zinchenko, yes, although a lot went through him, maybe it's not his fault in terms of what happened on that second move and that second ball, Jared. But it just seemed a little bit disjointed today. And there were a couple of bad passes that he had, but overall, yeah, he was decent.
Yeah, not a poor game, but certainly nothing to write home about with Zinchenko today. So we'll move it forward to the midfield. We'll start at the 6. Thomas Partey, one of my favorite sort of
you carry on.
underappreciated players this year. Almost every game, I come away from it thinking, when I think of man of the match, almost every time I think Thomas Partey was amazing, but Odegaard had a great game, or Thomas Partey was great and Saka had a good game. So he's not getting maybe the appreciation that he deserves, but he's been massive, especially the last 3 to 5 games in both West Ham and Brighton. There was a time when we lose possession in the final third. They try and bring it out a little bit too quickly and recklessly. He immediately recovers, makes a pass, and we've gotten goals off of it. And those, while he doesn't get the credit for those a lot of times, he absolutely should. And I think today was another day where he just goes out and plays his game. When he's healthy, it's a completely different team with him. And I think even more so than any other player in the team, if you take him out, you see the biggest drop off. And I thought he was great. I had him down on my list here for an 8.5 today. I thought he was very good.
Yeah, I have him on the same mark as Gabriel. I think the two of them today were fantastic. Thomas is just exactly everything that you said. I concur and I agree. He's become so fundamentally important to us. What he does, the breakups are incredible. He did it 2 or 3 times today as well. His tackles, well said, Evgeny, they were awesome today. And the one against Brighton in particular for our first goal just shows you that was a counter-attack, a potential goal with this Brighton team waiting to happen. Breaks up the play and boom, we go 1-0 up. He's our most valuable player right now, I think. No doubt about that. So, yeah, Thomas gets an 8.5 for me as well. Jay.
Yeah, and I'm with you there, Elliot. I think he is one of the most valuable on the team. Now, one of his partners in the midfield who had a little bit of an up and down game and mixed it up like he typically does in Granit Xhaka. So I'll let you kick off on Xhaka.
So the first half, I thought Xhaka, Kev was saying that against Brighton, that Xhaka didn't have his he's been playing, I would say, explosive style of football this season, but he has been just so amazing in that box to box, role that he's been playing. Against Brighton, Kev said that we didn't see like the best of him, but he still had a really good game. And he was, I think more working in the shadows in that game. And I think in this game too, a little bit until the second half, where I felt he really came into the game much more fluidity in his movement, the passing. He tried to get forward a little bit more. He was up and down in this match. So for me, he gets a 7. I was worried when he got the yellow card. I was hoping that, as I said at the top of the show, that wouldn't come back to bite him. But was it his best game? Maybe he's more of a 6.5 than a 7. He was decent, but at times I think he was AWOL in this match.
Yeah, I think decent is an accurate assessment of his game today. Didn't play poorly. There were a couple times going forward where he got into a lot of space, like we've seen him do earlier this year. And it just, like you said, we just didn't quite have it in the final third. We were just missing that one final distinctive action to really get something out of it. But he did still play relatively well. I'm glad you went down from a 7 to a 6.5. I also had him at 6.5, but I feel like I'm the Russian judge. You score everybody, and then I just come in and undercut it low on almost every spot we got. So I'm glad to hear you drop him down to a 6.5 as well. Moving forward, let's see here. Well, I mean, you can't talk about Arsenal without talking about the captain. I know we kind of touched on him earlier in the way that we thought he was taken out of the game a little bit by Newcastle, which credit to them for that. Where'd you end up falling on Martin Odegaard?
He gets a 6 for me today because I was talking to Lev from the Arsenal Lounge on Twitter, and he was saying he needs to move. He needs to speed the game up. Everything was very passive today, wasn't it? And I was saying to him, it's just because we've been suffocated by Newcastle. Some games you're able to play your game, and in other games you're not. And sometimes it's hard to adapt. There were 2 or 3 players surrounding him for most of the match. He wasn't able to kind of, perform the way that we've seen over the last few weeks. I've called him the greatest showman. Some games are just going to be more physical. And when it gets more physical, there's no doubt that, his kind of talent diminishes in terms of what he offers the team. However, he didn't give up. He kept running. He kept trying to find the ball. I would say this is very unfair. Sorry, it just caught my eye real quick. I have to go back. Who said he was atrocious? That's not that he wasn't. Sometimes you have to accept that, yes, did he play brilliantly like we've seen him? No, but he got marked out of the match, and that happens in football. So for me, he gets a 6 today.
Let me see. Xhaka I had down for a 6 as well. I thought he was very okay. Nothing crazy, but I think you made a good point in the style of play in the game, the way it went, because you see it not just in football, but in all sports. When you have one team that's very technically proficient and probably looks the better team, the way that you kind of counteract that is by trying to play them physical, slow the game down, take them out of what they're trying to do. And that's what they did. The time wasting too, it just really kills any sort of flow the game would have had. And the whole second half, I was thinking, if this was a World Cup game from this year, we would see 15 minutes of added time because that was the way it was going. And you just knew it wasn't going to happen for us today. And I thought 5 was low at the end. Probably most every Arsenal fan did. But, you had 95 minutes to get it done, and we didn't get it done. So I'm not going to complain about an extra, 1 or 2 minutes of stoppage time added on there.
He can't handle big games. He's been big in all the games this year. I think that's a transition that he's made this season, especially in those matches, that before the World Cup, Jared.
I would tend to agree. I think he's been one of our most pivotal players. His transition this year, when you talk about the difference from Arsenal last season that was battling to try and get 4th to Arsenal this season that's sitting top of the table, it's hard to think of a player who's had an even bigger level of improvement in that time, he's right there at the top of that list. So yeah, I would tend to disagree, because I think for the most part he's been really, really solid this year.
Yeah. And Lynn, I agree. And we're going to get to this, because this is the perfect example of why didn't Fabio Vieira come on for Odegaard, with 15, 20 minutes to go, without the depth, the way the Newcastle players were taking our players out. Yeah, totally agree with that. And we're going to get to it when we talk about the gaffer.
Alrighty. So we'll move forward to the front line here. We'll start out right. Bukayo Saka, the player everybody thinks of when you think of Arsenal now, kind of the star of stars that we have. No goal contributions today, as we got shut out. A little uncharacteristic by the way he's been playing, but I thought was dangerous at times. Did you think the same, or did you think they were able to kind of remove him from what he likes to do as well?
I thought that if we were going to get a goal today, it was going to come from Saka. And, in the first 15 minutes, I thought that he was completely destroying Newcastle on that flank. And, he was able to do exactly what he wanted. Managing, I thought he managed the ball well. What I want from Martinelli and Saka, Jared, a little bit more is, which I feel that they've improved on this year, is just to look up a little bit more and release the ball sooner. And I felt like they reverted back to that hogging the ball to try and be the hero and make something happen today. And sometimes you just got to make the simple pass. Towards the end of the match, I thought he looked a little bit gassed. I mean, if there's anyone who's played a lot of football, it is Bukayo. But for me, I just thought he was one of our best players again and never gave up. And, he gets a 7.5 for me today.
Yeah, I had Saka down for a 7. I thought early in the game, like you said, he was really effective. It's hard to imagine a bigger mismatch for a winger wide than someone as short and skillful and quick as Saka, with what's Dan Burn, about 6'7". In a one-on-one situation, Saka's going to beat him every time. So not only was that a threat, but that forced them to really bring some extra defenders over. We saw Willock over in that area. And in general, that's how you open up opportunities for other players. So we didn't end up taking advantage of it, but his impact is really felt, especially when you get a mismatch like that down on that side, because he's an incredibly tough player to stay in front of for anyone, let alone someone who's so much bigger and I'll nicely say more of a plotting type than Bukayo is. But I thought you raised a really good point on their lack of, or not really lack of passing, maybe to hold the ball a little too much. But I think that comes with maturity. When you're a star player who has had good results and are flying high, as both he and Martinelli are, I understand their want to really try and get something out of the game when it's not going their way. And I think that's something that comes with maturity, understanding positioning and when to move the ball a little sooner at times.
Yeah, and then again, another good example today of needing a little bit more of that impetus on the flanks and being able to kind of because we'll get to Eddie, but we really didn't create too many chances today. And this is another example of how important it is to sign a player of a Mykhailo Mudrik's ilk that you can come and that can come on and transition the game. So, yeah, I mean, again, that core spine, if it's not Saliba, it's Gabriel. In the midfield, if it's not Partey, it's Xhaka. And then up front, it's Saka or Martinelli. And today it was Gabriel, Partey and Saka, who I felt were combining the best. And with Zinchenko at times, of course, with Partey as well. But he's so important to this team. And once again, he proved that today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing I did take from this coming down the stretch when we're really searching for a goal is the glaring lack of depth on the bench right now. But as you said, we're looking at players like Mudryk, who are dynamic wing players. We have Smith Rowe coming back. So hopefully a combination of a couple of those things sorts that out for us a little bit. But when Gabriel Jesus is out and you look at that bench when the lineup comes out, it looks pretty thin further down the squad. So, obviously we all hope that gets addressed sooner rather than later. So we've got some options late in games like this when we need a goal. I
mean, Jared, it's the perfect example of a game where you need someone to come off the bench and change it, get you a winner, or that plan B. I know I mentioned Giroud often on this show, but we've never really replaced that kind of, just lob the ball in the air and have someone bang it in, or a Mitrovic type, someone with a bit of muscle who can come on and cause some problems at the end, or a talented player like a Mudryk who can come on and change the game in many different ways.
I agree. And when we re-signed Eddie, that was sort of my, critique as much of analysis of the situation, is when you have a player who's more of a similar size and skill set, it's easier to move that player into the starting lineup because not everyone's having to make as large of adjustments around them as you would with, say, a Mitrovic in there. But the downside of that is when things aren't going to plan and not working, you don't have really an alternative. You've just got more of the same. So it makes it kind of difficult at times to get wins at the end like this when you really don't have any sort of dynamic, game-changing player on the bench, as we don't right now.
And I just want to bring, he didn't play, but I saw Demsek made a comment, and I agree with you. And so did Yanto. This is the game where someone like Emil Smith-Rowe can come on and make a major difference. And we need him to get back ASAP. 300 of you in live chat. Arsenal 0, Newcastle 0. We're still top of the league, and we are still at the, in this moment. So I hope you're not too disappointed. Let us know what you think on the play ratings. But for me today, I felt like, wow, this game was screaming out for a player like Emil Smith-Rowe to come on.
So many games last season, he came on at the 75-minute mark, and we'd get a goal in the next 10 minutes. And those players are hard to come by because it's difficult to come from sitting on the bench into a Premier League game and immediately hit the ground running and make something happen. And he's got that in him. So I'm with you. I think when he comes back, that's going to be a big impact for us. And hopefully we see him for the Oxford game we've got coming up in just a few days.
Yeah.
As we're finishing out and moving through the player ratings here, next on the list, I know we both kind of mentioned him in tandem when we talked Saka, but Gabriel Martinelli, another game, probably not his best, probably not his worst. What did you think of his performance today?
I thought in the second half, towards the end of the match, he tried to take it by the scruff of the neck, as they say. That would have been a bell move there for Magic. He didn't have his best game. He tried. Is that the new bell? It's a bit defunct, isn't it, that new bell?
Got one on hand just for emergencies.
Love it. Not his best game. I thought he tried. I think he hogged the ball too much. He gets a 6 for me.
Yeah, I had him down as a 6.5. I would tend to agree with basically everything you said. It's part of his game is he's so good when he carries the ball and he can beat players. And when it works, it looks brilliant. But when it's not working, it kind of stands out as the glaring weakness that he should have moved the ball quicker, which I think that's always going to kind of be the dichotomy of him as a player. When it works, it looks amazing. When it doesn't, it sort of stands out as an area that potentially needs improvement. But 6.5 for me, I thought he was pretty good on the day and got into some dangerous areas, as he always does.
And Jared, let's be honest, again, he was marked very well in this match. They didn't let him breathe too much. They did a really good job on our key players. I'll give them credit for that, and can't argue with that. In the end, sometimes it's just it's one of those days at the office where, you have every intention of trying, your best, but sometimes the opposition just stifles that.
Yeah, and that's the nature of playing in the toughest league in the world, is that every team is good and everybody's got good players just as we do. And sometimes it's just not our day, and the variation in talent level is so small when you're not completely on it. It's tough to get a result.
Yeah.
So we'll finish out the starters here. Eddie Nketiah up front, obviously the one that everybody's always looking at with Jesus out. Created what I thought.
It's not his fault today. No, go on. Keep going.
Yeah, I thought he created our best scoring opportunity. It was probably just before the 90th minute, 85, 90 minutes. Ball plays in. He puts what I thought was a perfect touch on it, right into his own path, onto his left foot. And he puts a decent strike on it. Nick Pope gets the leg out and makes the save, which was a good one. I thought Eddie couldn't have played that any better, similar to what we saw previously when he hit somebody on the spin, and just has a good first touch in that area, good awareness of the goalkeeper. And I thought put a pretty decent strike on it, given it was his off foot. And unfortunately, Pope was up to the challenge.
I think this is the perfect example. I've said that a lot in this game. This game's going to be like, I'll tell you, I think if I'm using it as a blueprint for stuff, can you imagine what Mikel's going to do with it? I think it's a good example of, if he's not scoring, what does he offer to the team? So when Jesus isn't scoring, we know what he offers to the team. It's that insane pressing, open spaces, goes higher up the pitch, opens up for Saka, Martinelli, Bosch. With Eddie, because that's not his game, and I think his pressing has been better, and I think in the second half, he did better. I didn't feel like we needed to play the pressing game much today. So I felt like this could be an opportunity for him to grab a goal. I think he should have finished that chance. Those are the moments in the match where you've got to, and I know it was a good leg save from Pope, but, I just felt like, could he have dunked? Could he, did the dink over. I don't know, maybe a bit more power. It was a good save. But in that moment, I just thought, wow, you've got to be finishing those chances. I'm not killing him. He's not the reason why it was 0-0 today by any stretch of the imagination. But I just think that these are the times and the moments, again, you need someone super clinical up front. He's been really good in the last couple of games grabbing a goal. And I just thought that was a moment that he missed to be the hero.
Yeah, and that's if you want to be a striker for a Big Six team in the Premier League, those are the opportunities you have to take advantage of. And, unfortunately, he wasn't able to today. He has a good scoring record over these last few games, but like you said, he almost has that same sort of patina to him that Alba had at the end, is if he's not scoring goals, what does he do? And unfortunately today he had the chance to be the hero and have everyone say he was man of the match with the game winner. And unfortunately for us, couldn't convert it. And it's 2 points dropped. But I'm with you. He's not the reason for today's result. I thought he was, serviceable in the area. I had him down for a 6.5 on my list.
He didn't get any service, Jared, today. Our ball in the final third today was just poor. So he was feeding off scraps. Scrappy game. Eddie was feeding off scraps.
Yeah, it certainly seemed that way. And I suppose, I hate to say it, it's a credit to them because that's the type of game they want to play and what they want to see happen. But it's just a frustrating one because that was one, if he puts that away, it would have just felt extra good that they had wasted so much time over that previous 40 or so minutes that they would have had none left to try and find an equalizer. But
I'm hearing that Adrian Clark said that he counted 10 minutes of wasted time. And I can't remember which journalist wrote an article about this, about how much football is actually played in game and how much is wasted. And, when you look back at the World Cup, maybe they were doing it properly. Mm-hmm. Maybe they were actually getting it right, as opposed to people thinking, oh, let's just kind of pile on the minutes, Jared, because, it was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it cuts against the entire idea of stoppage time that we're keeping track of it and then not adding that full amount on. That's the whole point of the game, is so we get to see 90 minutes of the teams playing the game. And if one team wants to time waste, go ahead. If you're going to add on that same amount, we're going to come out in the wash just fine. And I also think it would do a lot to curb time wasting if they really watched it more carefully and put the proper amount on the end to where you're not getting a benefit from doing it. Of course, that's going to stop people from wasting their own time doing it. And I think is better for the game and makes it more enjoyable to watch. So it's, like many things, something I'd very much like to see and have very little hope that we're actually going to see.
And Lynn, I don't know. We don't know if Jesus would have scored that goal because he hasn't been scoring those goals. So we got to give Eddie some credit here. He's done his job in the last 2 games and he's been asked to do that. And unfortunately, he missed that chance. Against a hard defense like Newcastle, Eddie will struggle. Yeah. Stephen No Laguna in the house. They were beastly. They're big boys. They are big lads.
They're giants in there. And yeah, I would argue if you had to pick out one part of Eddie's game where he may be better than Gabriel Jesus, it is his finishing. He tends to get the job done when he gets opportunities. He just creates a lot fewer for himself, I think, than Jesus does. But when he gets a shot on target, he tends to convert them at a fairly high rate. So, it's hard to bash him for that. He got it on frame, which is more than we can say for a lot of guys today. He gave us an opportunity, and unfortunately, Pope was up to the challenge.
Right. Okay. Here we got one more to go. Tomiyasu. Sorry. I was going to go to Mikel and ask. I was going to ask the squaddies, if you see a quote. Guys, it's stormy here. It's gone all dark all of a sudden. Dun, 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 dun. If you see a quote from Mikel, please put it in the chat box because I'd love to read one out before we close. Sorry, Jared, I interrupted you. We're probably going to go to Tommy.
Yeah, last one on the list, the only sub of the day. He came in, I think, around the 75th minute. For me, it was kind of a blah performance, like a lot of guys we've said today. He didn't play poorly, I didn't think, but he really didn't stand out either. Granted, he wasn't on for a whole lot of time, and for a lot of the time on, we had the ball, so he was just kind of, the valve to stop them from countering on us and keep the ball in, but had not much to do. But I thought, did what he does and played an adequate game. So I'd give him, just based on the time he was in, probably a 5, just because we didn't see a whole lot out of him.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with what you're saying. This is a player that had been out for a while. Disappointment again at the World Cup, coming back in, trying to get his match fitness going. We all know Tommy's going to come good. Came in, did his job, didn't make any mistakes. Here's the quote. We missed in the final third. We had so many situations, and then we had 2 scandalous penalties. They are 2 penalties. It's very simple. I'm talking about what I've seen now, and it's 2 scandalous penalties. We've had enough chances to win the game. Newcastle haven't played any team like this season. It's credit to my players. Is that his actual quote, or did you write that, Marcus? Just double checking. Scandalous. That is a very, very strong word, isn't it, Jared?
It really is. I'm a little surprised to see that in there, is if that is the direct quote. It's very apparent that Mikel Arteta has had plenty of media training in his time as a player and as a manager. He usually chooses what he says pretty carefully, and it's pretty well thought out, which maybe this is as well, to draw some attention to it. But it is a little surprising to see that in there. But I think he is correct in the last sentence there, where he said it's a credit to his players that Newcastle hasn't had to play anybody this season the way they played us. And I think that is spot on, that we're a dangerous enough side. They couldn't handle us trying to play their usual way. So they kind of forced into what we ended up seeing.
And that's the direct quote on the Sky Sports website. And Carlos has added this. There are 2 penalties. It's that simple. I'm not talking about the referee. I'm talking about what I've seen. And now it's 2 scandalous penalties not given. All right. Let's talk about him real quick. And why did he not use any more subs? Jared, help me understand this. All of a sudden, let's look at this, right? So on the bench today, we had Kieran Tierney, who I felt this was a good game, actually. This was a perfect Kieran Tierney game, a little bit more physical. Rob Holding, I get. Tomiyasu came on. Vieira could have come on for Eddie, could have come on for Odegaard. El Neni could have come on for Xhaka, maybe. Marquinhos, I don't know if he's ever going to get a game. But why? What happened was he burned by Brighton? Did that scare the bejesus out of him?
It's possible that it's that. And I think in many cases, the correct answer is often the most obvious answer. And that's that he didn't think anybody on his bench was going to come in and impact the game the way he would have wanted them to, or change anything. I was with you, and that I thought the one that kind of stood out as the obvious choice for me would have been Kieran Tierney. But it very well also could have been that after bringing on both Tierney and Tomiyasu together in the last game, and it kind of getting away from us a bit, that maybe he was a little shell-shocked and didn't want to go that route for fear of making the same double substitution 2 games in a row and conceding, would be immediately looked at as someone who's not learning from their mistakes. How much that plays into his thought process, I don't know. Like I said, I think it just comes down to the baseline of he wasn't super confident that any of those guys was going to change the game. The only other one that I think would even be considered is Vieira. I could go either way on it. I certainly wouldn't have faulted him for putting him in for anybody in the front 4, really. But I also am not super upset that he didn't put him in, because I'm not sure that he comes in and against a team like Newcastle creates much for us either.
Do you know, one of the thoughts that ran through my mind, Jared, was that maybe with the fact that our next game is Oxford in the FA Cup and we don't play Tottenham until the 15th, he felt this team was the team to see this game out, because he's probably got no intention of playing Thomas in the FA Cup. He's got no intention of playing Saka, hopefully, and Martinelli. He's going to rest these players. I don't want him to throw the FA Cup away by any stretch of the imagination. But when you're in the position that we're in this year, I'll understand if he does put a very kind of like secondary squad out. And that was one of the thoughts in my mind, was that he needs these guys to close out the game. I don't know. I just felt like also, was it a message to the owners? We need players. And is that a little bit of a move from him? I'm not saying that's what he's thinking in game, but it's also it is a message though, isn't it? It's like, we still need players who can come on and affect the match in moments like this.
I think it's extremely obvious we need to add something to the attack, because like I said, with Jesus out, that bench doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. The nice thing that I'll say is I'm not 100% sure that he needs to inspire the owners at this point. It sounds like they're being pretty aggressive in, supplying the funds for Mudryk and trying to get that done as quickly as possible. And, from what I've seen of Arteta, I'm sure there's a contingent plan if that doesn't happen. But it looks to be one, by all accounts, it's, getting closer by the day. And I'd be surprised at this point if we don't bring him in. And like you said, at this point, since we didn't have him for Newcastle, we don't play Spurs until the 15th. So there's no rush on that transfer necessarily. We don't need him in tomorrow. And I think they're willing to, take the time necessary to hopefully get Shakhtar to agree with us a little bit on a price and get the move done.
Yeah, definitely. What's your mark for Mikel today?
It's a tough one. I always loved his energy and how excited he gets on the touchline. I love when he gets in Eddie's house face at the end. I love that sort of energy that he brings. As far as the game, I think tactically, when you watch the first 15 minutes, we had a game plan to go out there and rip them apart. That sort of got stifled, not by, I don't think, better tactics as much as it did by just the nature of a game that's going to be completely stop and go for the last 60 or so minutes with a lot of fouls, just a lot of stoppages in play, a lot of guys injured, taking some time off. And I would give him a 6. It's hard to give him a high mark on a game where we didn't adjust to that enough to find a goal. But I didn't think our planning was atrocious, and that, the beginning of the game, we obviously were going to be the dominant side if they didn't start playing completely different than the way they started.
I think we have to be really careful. He let his emotions get the best of him against Klopp at Anfield. And I think when you have a young team and you have a team that you're still trying to mentally condition to be big in these moments, your manager needs to be calmer. And I think today it was another example of, I love Mikel, I love his passion, don't get me wrong, but there are just some moments where you need to curb that a little bit, and your players riff off that. I'm like that. If I'm in a bar with a mate of mine and, there's something going on, I'm backing up my mate, I'm getting stuck in. And I feel like with a young player, maybe that wasn't the best analogy, but I think you guys know where I'm coming from on that front. I just think he needs to be a little bit careful. We need him to be a calm head. He cannot be freaking out on the sideline like that in games against Newcastle or Manchester United or Tottenham. I love the passion, but he needs to crank it down a notch just a little bit, because towards the end there, that can spill over onto the pitch. If that's, it was at 1, it's 0-0, but if we're losing a game like that 1-0 and he's acting like that, you do not want red cards. You don't want losing players. We've got how many players on yellows? We need everybody to keep their heads. I said on this show many times, Arsenal Football Club will rise and fall here this year because we've got the talent, we've got the players, past our starting 11. We know it's a little bit dodgy. They need to do the right thing in January. But if you don't have it up here, we will fall, and we will fall fast. That's just me. Right. That's all we got for you today. Do we have anything else? Any closing thoughts, Jared, from you?
No, I mean, it's hard to have, even coming off a disappointing game, it's hard to not be pretty positive. It's the new year. We're still sat top of the table in a season where, if you ask most people in August, they'd say their absolute goal for this year was to finish 4th and get into the Champions League, and thought we'd be battling for it as we were last year. So to draw at home to Newcastle, a team sat 3rd in the league, and still be sitting top here on, January 3rd. Overall, I'm about as happy as I could be. It'd be hard to anticipate anything better than what we've gotten thus far. Doesn't mean there's not room for improvement, but we put ourselves in a heck of a good place. And, hopefully we can keep our heads down, stay composed, and get some good results, because we do have some tough ones coming up the rest of the way.
Totally agree with you. And no, he shouldn't have punched the 4th official. No. Stop the madness. Don't get me wrong. I love the passion. I'm obsessed with passion. I'm Greek. MG just said to me, so ironic that a Greek person's telling a Spaniard to calm down over passion. I just don't want, I'm keeping my eye on this squad, and we've done a great job so far. Let's just keep it to that. Right. Go follow Jared. He's absolutely epic. You can find him on the Gooners pod. With Magic Mike and the rest of the boys. Follow him here, please, at JC_AFC. Your dulcet tones are a delight to listen to. You probably have one of the best mics in the game, and I love your setup, and I adore you, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. I love anytime we can get together and chat a bit, which in a couple of weeks we may just be able to do in person. So very much looking forward to that too.
That is right. I haven't told the squaddies yet, but let's just say someone might be heading to London in a couple of weeks, as is someone over here. So, we'll probably be at the Manchester United game. Watch out for that. All right, everyone. Love you lots, like vodka shots. I will see you soon. Keep your eye out on the Twitter feed and on the YouTube community page. We didn't lose. We're still top. Everyone has to play tomorrow. Bob's your uncle. Fanny's your aunt. Good night. At ease, everybody. At ease.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.